Okay. All right, let's get going here. So this is just a little bit of an introduction to shamanism. Okay, it's rather brief because this is a huge topic. And first of all, I want to just highlight how universal shamanism is, all right? It's really the root and source and origin of religion. It is most ancient. As far as back we can go in time with humanity, this is the religion that we find, so to speak, if you even want to call it a religion. It is the spiritual religious practice tradition of hunter-gathering societies. And that changes once agriculture develops. And with that, we get sort of more an emphasis on fertility rights. And eventually we find increased urbanization. And then with that, the beginnings of civilization, you know, like in Mesopotamia or Egypt and India, China, what have you. And then you get the beginnings of writing and then philosophizing, and the world religions will come out of that. But what's interesting here with shamanism is its universality, that across cultures, people have no historical connection or ethnic connection, if it be over in Siberia, in Northern Europe and Russia, or over to the Amazon, or over in Australia or Africa, you know, where there's no linkage whatsoever, we find that there's common features to this thing we call shamanism, which is most interesting. And so why is it that there are these universal features and aspects of it? And we'd have to say, and I do hold to, is because it's rooted in direct human experience. And that is why we have these similar features that we find with respect to shamanism. Anyways, I could go on there in terms of my own personal experience in that department. But yeah, it's very real. So exactly what is it? Well, here, a shaman is the key figure here, male or female. A shaman is someone who is able to journey to the other side, to the invisible world of spirit, so to speak, in order to access information, access power, get guidance, and be able to then bring healing to the people. And the whole focus always is of service to the community. Okay. And this is the essential feature of shamanism, is the individual who has this ability to make that kind of a journey. And so what's key here, and I should move my little picture thing down, what you see here on the right, just so you can see that it's actually a bit of a drawing of a drum. And the use of drums is really quite universal in shamanism. And often in indigenous people, what they would do with their drums is they would draw pictures on there that represented the universe, how they saw the universe, the different aspects of it, that they then would journey to through the drum. The drum became a vehicle through which, as they entered into an altered state of consciousness through drumming, that would bring them into this other world. And it's basically a map of the universe, is what usually would be drawn on a lot of indigenous drums. Okay, that's sort of the symbolism and what's meant with that. And again, you know, it varies some according to, you know, every shaman would have their particular drum that they make themselves, where they would put in their map of the universe that they journey into when they go on the shamanic journey. So, but just to backtrack a little bit, what is foundational conceptually to shamanism is the idea of that we're connected to this web of spiritual energy, power, connection. And it's like there is an energy and an intelligence that's embedded throughout the universe that connects all that is. And that is what is the source of life, sustains life, directs life, is this presence that is both intelligent, a form of consciousness, as well as energy. And that this is what's universal and what interconnects everything, all aspects of reality. And so it's like being aware of that web of connectedness and knowing how to tune into it and work with it is the key thing. And that is then largely done through shifting your consciousness, leaving our ordinary everyday state of consciousness and shifting it into an altered state of consciousness. And what, you know, I'll talk about him briefly at the end. Michael Harner likes to call it the non-ordinary state of consciousness. Okay. And that is what you need to do. And this is, again, something very central to religious traditions, is the need to tune out this world in order to tune in to the spiritual world and spiritual realities, all right, through meditation, prayer, various techniques, okay? But in the beginning, the emphasis was really more radical, if you like. What we have for meditation and prayer and things like that today, I regard them as domesticated forms, domesticated, toned down forms of altered states of consciousness. In the past, it was more dramatic and intense, and I think as a result, all the more so powerful. And so there'd be many techniques that could be used for this, from enduring intense pain, like piercing the body and that inducing an altered state. When you think of, some certain First Nations people here in North America, certain tribes, they will have a special ritual of hooking their body and then through a rope, attaching it to a pole and swinging around the pole. Very intense, but it does induce an altered state of consciousness. Prolonged periods of fasting, enduring cold, enduring heat, trance dance, literally dancing to drums for days on end until you virtually would collapse. It'd be seriously intense stuff to go into an altered state, right? And then quite not as dramatic would be just through the use of drumming and or the use of a plant substance like ayahuasca, peyote, and what have you, known as entheogens, that you would take that would also induce an altered state, and that's really quite common. So anyways, going back here just to the drum, as you can see here, is one of the more popular forms and quite universal. And the idea is that it has to be of a certain rhythm, anyway, between 4 to 6 beats a second. Boom, 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 boom. And it evokes the theta wave brain frequency. And the theta wave brain frequency is almost, you could attain that as well through deep meditation. Once you develop the skill for meditation and can go deeply into it, you can attain a theta state. Okay, so there's different ways of attaining that, but this is a very common method. So some traditions, they call it, it's like the horse takes you to the other worlds, because it's like the running of a horse, the beats of the horse's hooves running. The drum has also been called in some traditions as something out of which pictures come, because when you hear the drumming and it's dark and you close your eyes and you'll start to see imagery come up, pictures come up. This is how you begin to journey into the other world. And again, of course, plant substances do this, right? But the key thing here is that, and we'll talk about more in a sec here, of this interconnectedness of reality of different dimensions, right? And that to access that, you need to shift your state of consciousness, right? It needs to alter. And a key thing is you work with imagination, because images will come to you. It's like that's how you experience that other world, largely is through images that will come. So it's literal physical sensations and things like that as well. But imagination is a key here, that where information will be communicated, where the experience takes place, is all up here in the mind through the imagination. Okay. Now, Indigenous people, they always saw themselves as being keepers of the sacred wisdom. Their understanding of reality, the nature of reality, the structure of reality, the interconnectedness of this reality, right? That kind of knowledge, that was really a source of wisdom, because it would, make it available to you knowledge about the future for divination, to get guidance, to know, where should we go this winter? How severe of a winter will it be that's coming around? How much food do we need to gather? When will the first winter storm appear? Whatever, people will need to know what might the future hold and be guided, right? They will also need to know how to heal people of various illnesses or various problems, know how to protect themselves from danger and harm. All right. So this is a key thing, is to know the nature of reality, the dynamics at play here, how it all functions and works, would then be a source of guidance and information a source of empowerment for the people, and a source of healing and protection. And so it was important to understand these things, to know how to work it. And the shaman, medicine man, healer, the sort of spiritual leader here had that kind of knowledge, right? And so they were keepers of this very important holy wisdom. Now, one thing to keep in mind is in these more primal traditions and societies, the people there, they didn't have this sense of hard boundaries of separation and distinction between the world out there of nature and the self, or the world of nature and what we think is spiritual, okay, or the sacred, nor a hard boundary between at night when you're sleeping and dreaming versus being awake. It's held that it's really, those boundaries are very soft. It's one reality interconnected, and you need to know how to tune in and work with all of those dimensions. They're interconnected. This is something that's foreign to us today, right? We really have split hard boundaries, and we're just so focused on one part, an aspect of the physical material reality, and have totally neglected the rest as though it doesn't even exist or it's useless. And that's the big mistake for us modern people. So anyways, it's held here that there are patterns that exist in nature, through events that might happen, in the dreams that we receive and have, the patterns and images and symbolism that shows up in dreams. Illnesses have their own patterns and symbolism involved, right? These are all energetic signatures, patterns that show up all over the place. And those are seen then as symbols. They carry information through those patterns. And that's a key way of knowing what things mean and how to work with them, all right? There's a knowledge in that. And so shamans tend to interpret those patterns, work with those patterns, can see what symbolic connections might exist between things. Because where there are those patterns, all right, that reflects that there's an energetic pattern. And through energetic pattern, there'll be energetic resonances, things that will be attracted or linked in, right? And then other times actually repelled because they're opposite. But things work on an energetic level. So you start to clue in as to what those energies are by being able to tune into those patterns. That's the key thing. So just to give an example in working with that, a shaman would then put on a mask or a costume and then take on the bodily movement, i.e. patterns that symbolize the pattern of an actual animal, all right? So that if you want to tap into the energy and power of bear, you would then wear a bear rug and a bear mask and start to move and act like a bear in order to tune in and tap into and work with bear energy. Okay, because then there's a certain kind of energy around a bear, a certain kind of powers, certain kind of characteristics, right? And this is then often what's done in rituals, and this is why you'll often see this. I think I have this as the next slide here. Yeah, you know, in terms of rituals, dance, or how the shaman or medicine man healer would look and dress, right? You can see that here we have on the one hand buffalo horns, on the other one a bear that he's wearing over his body, and then he also has the skull of a bear, for example, doing kind of a healing ritual, but using bear power to do that ritual. Here you'll have more of an emphasis, it looks to me like eagle feathers, right? And so this is a very common thing, is working with these energies by, again, through resonance, wearing that kind of clothing that symbolizes a connection with that animal, and therefore the energy associated with that animal, all right? Just to give you a bit of an idea as to how this works. Now, I think, yeah. And so what's a very common thing in shamanic traditions is the idea that you have a power animal. Sometimes, you know, depending on the traditions, they'll call them guardian spirits of various kinds. And they go from first being an animal to sometimes being half human, half animal, to being more of like a type of human figure. You see this in all traditions throughout the world, in ancient societies, okay, in primal societies, if it be in European folk tales, going in terms of pagan Europe, right, or wherever you want to go in the world. It's just amazing. It's so interesting. So anyways, here, I just love this particular description by Kenneth Meadows, a book on shamanism, and I'll just read it to you. A power animal is an expression in animal form of an intangible, typo there, spiritual energy force. Okay, it's like a power animal is an expression in an animal form of an intangible, i.e. invisible, spiritual kind of energy force. And it is a spirit pattern that can arise and that you work with from subconscious and unconscious levels that then is given life through the human spirit, through our intentions. It then characterizes the nature, the attributes, and behavior of an essentially spiritual force, which has the ability to perform certain work and give it expression in material existence. In other words, it says a power animal is thus an energy pattern, right, that provides the abilities that it characterizes. This is the king thing. It has certain kinds of powers about it, right? And so this will be a key thing in shamanic work, is held that, first of all, everybody is naturally born with at least one power animal, if not more, okay? And that is then kind of your guardian spirit that is there to protect you, empower you, guide you in life. And that there'll be aspects about you that will kind of have certain qualities that reflect that particular power animal, right? And everybody needs this power animal for protection and strength and guidance, all right? It will protect you and ensure your good health. And I'll talk a bit more about this later, but just to give you this initial idea here in terms of how things work, right? So now a little bit more to unpack about the nature of reality. Reality is seen as one larger interconnected web, which I already mentioned. That interconnectedness itself is rooted in what we could call spirit, the sacred, the divine, a living intelligence and energy that is the source of all that is. But within that interconnected web of reality, there exist different levels and spheres. Okay, so there is, of course, this obvious physical material world of the five senses, right? And we moderns think that this is all there is. But here in the shamanic tradition, and as we saw in other aspects where I talk about the magical view of reality in the ancient world, this is the key thing, is that this physical world is actually a mirror, a result of an invisible spiritual world that's behind this physical world. As it is above, so it is below. Remember that as above, so below idea. And so it's a mirror result of a largely unseen physically, but yet can be felt and seen in alternative ways through an altered state or a non-ordinary state of consciousness, okay, that exists. And that other world is often called in many shamanic traditions as the dream world. And that dream world, where things sort of pre-exist on a spiritual level as a type of blueprint, as images with energies around them. It's like that is the realm of causation. That is the ultimate reality. The dream world is the real world. And this physical world is just an acting out, a playing out, is a result of what's actually first happening in the dream world, okay? And that is indeed the reality, is the spiritual, and the physical is a mirror of that. So, so this dream world, this spiritual world, is one that you access through the imagination. It's through human consciousness that there is this connection with this invisible imaginal realm. And in certain depth psychology, like Carl Jung and others, they would call it the imaginal world, the imaginal world. And this is the key thing for understanding spiritual experiences and spiritual reality, is the imaginal world where archetypal realities exist And those archetypal realities are those energy fields, forces, patterns that then appear as like bear spirit or the goddess Lakshmi or what have you. All right, different deities, spirit animals, power animals, whatever you want to call them, all right, will show up. So anyways, I get again into tangents here, but this is a key thing. Now, in terms of that dream world, though, there are 3 levels. So when the shaman goes on a journey, goes into an altered state, usually with a purpose in mind to begin with, having a particular purpose or goal, right? They journey into one of 3 worlds. When they enter the altered state, they will either go and journey to the upper world, or they will journey to this, what's called the middle world, which is this realm, but on a spiritual level, or they can journey to a lower world, okay? And there are different features and aspects to these different worlds. So the lower world is where you would journey to if you needed to get in touch with a power animal, or maybe find one, get access to one, call forth a particular power animal to bring in the power that you need to deal with a certain situation, okay? You would look to the lower world. Also, the elements of fire, earth, air, water, the spirit of the land as well, the spirit of plants. Okay, that's all in the lower world that you would journey to. A shamanic journey into the lower world can also, what's also often involved there is some form of initiation rituals, going deeper into connections with various spirit beings and helpers. A time of trial and testing perhaps can be involved. Okay, these would be some of the things. And usually that's also where there would go for healing purposes, the healing for plant medicine, also to recover lost souls. Okay, I'll talk about that more in a sec in terms of soul retrieval is often journeying into the lower world. Sometimes to make peace with angry spirits that aren't happy and kind of bring some kind of a resolution that way. Okay, so you kind of journey into the lower world. And that would involve, say, visually what would happen is you would perhaps see yourself going into a cave and going down into the earth, or maybe going into the hollow, a hole at the bottom of a tree, the hollow there, and then going down into the earth. So there's usually a sense of going down into the earth and into that world. Then you have the upper world. And there, the upper world is usually the place where you meet the wise ones, the wise elders. They could be, dead ancestors that are there that are elevated and can provide wisdom as the elders. Various gods, goddesses can show up there. Archetypal kind of beings, mythical kind of creatures of other worlds and dimensions, half human, half animal, something like Pegasus, the horse with wings, things of that nature is what you would find in the upper world. And then to go there, usually sometimes it's like you'd go into the tree and you'd go up through the tree into the higher world, like almost like climbing a ladder, the story in the Bible of Jacob's ladder going to the heavens where the angels are. That's almost like a shamanic type of thing of climbing up to the upper world. Getting on the back of a bird and flying through the sky and going through the clouds, piercing them and getting to the other side of the clouds, right? You're going into the upper world. So there's various means, but there's a sense of a journey going upward, right? And piercing a veil, the veil of this world that separates this world from the upper world is very common. Just like when you go through the earth, you're piercing a veil to go underneath the earth eventually to another world under the earth. Okay, so that's where, so you would go here for wisdom, for guidance, for information, for divination, to see into the future, going into the upper world, for example. Then the middle world is where the shaman would journey on this plane, the earth plane, so to speak, you don't call it that. And it's to get information or do work that's here on the more the physical plane. And it would be equivalent to what a lot of people would call astral traveling. where the sense of the soul leaves the body, but they can travel across space, go over the mountains to see, where the herd are that they need to hunt for because they can't find them, to sort of find the herd. So for whatever reasons, or just to find out maybe what's going on in another village, you journey in this world in one way or another. That's the middle world. Okay, so that's basically, the shaman would go on these journeys and journey to these, basically always these three worlds. This is what's so interesting. It's so consistent across cultures and space and time, right? And the goal is always to get information that's useful to the people, usually information about the future, so some form of divination, getting guidance. People need guidance. Number 2, healing, to be able to bring about healing to people as they may need it, and to shift things there, right? And I'll talk a bit more about that in a sec. Healing, guidance, healing, and thirdly, empowerment, to get the strength, the power that's needed for certain purposes. So it could be to empower the warriors if they're about to go into battle somewhere, for example, and getting that kind of power in place. So that's sort of what this is involved here. And so you've got, again, this is the invisible world, and it is the dream world. And as you enter that, I think I have that on the next slide. Yes, here we go. Key is working with imagination, all right? And so, as I mentioned, it's imagery that shows up, patterns with meaning, and they are those patterns, those symbolic patterns. They're containers of energy that can materialize. And so that imagery is a means of communication, bringing information to us. Like, we see things, understand things, we're told things through that imagery that comes to us, all right? And however, not only do we receive information, as we work with imagery, we can shift reality at that level of the dream world, right? This is where, today, what's so popular, the power of intention, the power of visualization. This is where you're kind of doing magic, where you're shifting reality. You go in there and then you purposely shift things through your imagination. You change things to see a disease being pulled out of this person, right? Or a tumor being removed. You visualize it. You kind of do the work at this level in the dream world through imagination, right? That the healing would be done. Or you would bring in like a spiritual intrusion, removing a dark energy that's come into a person that's causing illness, right? You would go in there and you would remove it, and you would decree and declare and use your spiritual authority to command it to go and depart now. And you bring healing to that person in the imaginal world, in that dream world, through the power of imagination. Okay. Or you would, perhaps somebody lost their soul. You're doing a form of soul retrieval. And there you would go and you would search, where is the soul? And there'd be you'd ask your spirit helpers to help you find the lost soul of this person. And an imagery would come up, and you'd see, here it is, as the form of that person, and maybe a certain trauma that happened and how they're feeling, and you maybe dialogue with them and ask them to come back into this person. You bring back that soul and retrieve it. So you're doing this work through the imaginal realm, all right, through visualization processes. So this is both an active and passive kind of affair. Sometimes you'll use visioning techniques to actively, with intention, shift reality, create a change, do some work of healing of some kind, right? Or you're in that realm and being passive, just to receive the information that you need, right? So you're just kind of at a state more of being passive and receptive, as opposed to going in there with intent to shift it, right? So it's sort of both an active and passive aspects to this. And so there you go. And so those are some aspects of that. Okay. Hopefully this all makes some sense here. There's just so much to this. I mean, it's huge. I got like about 30 books on shamanism, for crying out loud. It's a huge topic, and I'm just giving a little bit of an introduction. So one key thing, though, here in the shamanic tradition is in terms of health and vitality and power. that it's so important to have your connection spiritually working here for you, because that is what will have you be in power, to be strong in life, to be healthy and vibrant, all right, to be protected, and to be blessed and have good luck. Okay. And so you need things working here. So this will involve that you need to have your power animal in there. If your power animal leaves, so it's sort of kind of guardian spirit that brings you protection, guidance, and also strength and power. That's why they call it power animal. It brings you power. Right? If that is lost and is not replaced, you need to do shamanic work here to bring in a power animal for that to again for protection and power. Okay. And then also what happens is that if something traumatic happens, say you're in an accident, car accident, and the shock of that accident just whoop, and literally poof, can send a part of your soul out gone. And then there could be intense pain. Say you're about to die and your body is just wrecked with pain. There's a part of you that just like shuts down and leaves. All right. And because it's just too intense. It's like your soul does not want to be there experiencing all that pain. So it could be shock, could be pain, total terror and fear. Say something absolutely terrible is happening to you, you're being raped and almost murdered or something, right? It's like, whoa, it's not just your body needs healing, your soul needs healing. So there's a sense of soul loss that can happen. And sometimes it can be minor to major. There's degrees of intensity. But the result is, in a very dramatic, when there's total soul loss, it's like you're dead. Okay, that's when it's like, whoa, there's nothing there at all. And then where there's still some soul there, you're in a state of coma. All right, it's held that being in a coma state, it's like there's severe soul loss that's happened. But then it can even be to lesser degrees of just feeling just constantly depressed and just lost and dispirited. We get that word. Dispirited is like a part of your spirit has gone, has departed. Okay. And as you can see here, a little quote by somebody, soul loss can occur whenever we've experienced trauma or physical loss. So, just the loss of somebody you loved. It's like they've taken a part of you with them. All right. A part of you has gone with them. Right. And so an essential part of us is leaving, and soul retrieval then is the process of bringing back those parts of us that might be, stuck in the past or stuck with the trauma, has been disengaged, disconnected. And we need to call back all of our soul, right? Call back, bring back all of our power. So anyway, it's held though that through any kind of soul loss of power animal and whatnot, you're then vulnerable. You're vulnerable to illness, to accidents, to bad luck. All right. And then if there's a vacuum there, you've lost your protective power, you are then more susceptible to what they call spirit intrusion. Okay. And then also can use that when you get really injured, and it's like, oh, there's a sense of weakness and hurt, and there's an injury there, and it's like, oh, you're vulnerable, you're kind of open, that area is not so well protected, and there can be an intrusion, a spiritual intrusion that can then just keep on fueling that pain, that injury, that illness, and just keep going on some kind of an attachment in there of something external, just fueling it. All right. And then, of course, you also have more hostile, like dark magic stuff of people, putting spells and curses on people, and actual entity attachment. It's held that lost souls, like the departed dead, people who have died, but haven't found their way to the light kind of idea. And they're lost here in this middle world. In this middle world, there are souls, lost souls, the dead entities out there. And they're just either sometimes through anger, revenge, and they're just like angry, hateful kind of spirits. And if they see people who are really angry and hateful, it's like, oh, I like that kind of energy, and they'll just attach. You get entity attachment. So if there's a lot of anger, hatred, they'll love to be in there, and they'll feed off of that. It's like, oh yeah, I love this. Oh, that's my kind of energy. And they'll just feed off of that energy. Or if there's a lot of fear, all right, a lot of fear, there'll be entities that, oh, are just so afraid, and they'll just be attracted to the fear in someone's life, and you'll get entity attachment there, and that'll just feed the fear. And then you'll find yourself, wow, this fear is irrational. I shouldn't be this scared. And you'll be plagued by it until there's, spiritual release. You need to be released from that entity attachment. So this is a whole nother aspect too that comes into play here in terms of shamanic work. I don't know, is it? Yeah. Oh, addictions as well is a big thing. Addictions, tobacco, alcohol, sex, various things that become very addictive. There could be just a grip, an entity attachment, just feeding it. And it's almost like it's so hard to quit. And you literally need to face it, what it is, and command it to go, and do a ritual and cut those energetic ties and demand it to depart and be undone. Okay. And there's a lot of material out there. You could look up spiritual release therapy and whatnot. There's been conferences on this, even though it's still very much held taboo by usual mainstream psychiatry, medicine, whatnot. But there are many psychiatrists and doctors who do think there's something to all this stuff too. So anyways, this is just a bit of an introduction to shamanism, all right? Now, was there anything here that I wanted to say that I didn't say? I can't remember. I don't know. There's always so much I could say. So now in terms of the new spirituality, there's been a lot of interest in this. And let me just, I don't know, hopefully I want you to be able to see everything on here. The revitalization, the renewed interest in shamanism that's taken place in recent times. Okay, some of this is called neo-shamanism. And it all really kicks off largely in the 60s, the 1960s, through the work of Carlos Castaneda, who died in 98, who apparently, well, he did do doctoral research and got a PhD on Mexican shamanism. And he then started to write books beginning in 1968, and something like 8 books. I think the first one's called Tales of Don Juan. And then, there's a book title there of one of his books. The Teachings of Don Juan, like a whole series of these, where he describes, a Mexican shaman that he worked with, that he did his doctoral research on, and yada, 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 yada stuff. So, but there's a lot of controversy over him because it's been claimed that it was all a fraud, that he was a fake, that he actually just read books about Mexican shamanism and never actually met a Mexican shaman, and whatever. Okay. So whether that's the case or not, I don't know, but just so you know, there's controversy. But irrespectively of that, his books became a big seller. Best-selling books. People read this stuff and loved it and wanted to explore shamanism. And especially because out of the counterculture, we have this interest in altered states of consciousness with LSD and the work of Timothy Leary, and using altered states as a spiritual method, all right, for tuning into spiritual realities, right? This became very popular. Then we have Michael Harner, who did his doctoral research in Ecuador, was studying the shamans in Ecuador. And he died just recently, a couple of years ago. And he published the first book in 73, Hallucinogens and Shamanism, and then The Way of the Shaman in 1980. And then Cave and Cosmos is his latest book, 2013. And he was highly acknowledged by authentic shamans who granted him the right to be a shaman, and affirmed that he legitimately had shamanic abilities for healing and doing shamanic work. And it's very interesting stuff, so that would be great, if you guys read some of these books sometime. And then he set up the Foundation for Shamanic Studies and was very active in making shamanism available to Westerners. All right. And did workshops regularly, teaching, how to do the shamanic journey and doing soul retrieval and various things. And it really got picked up in the mid-1980s, more and more people getting into it as for therapeutic purposes. And so really got picked up in the personal growth, self-development field. And then you get this link of spirituality and psychology that we talked about. This is where shamanism really came in. And now there's tons of people, tons of books on shamanism. Okay, it's extremely popular today. All right, it really is. And so people are kind of have come full circle, going, you know, through the world religions. They're now going back to traditional shamanism in ways, because it is experientially focused. It's all about you making your journey and connecting to spiritual realities for your own personal life, for guidance, healing, and empowerment. Right? Uh, there is not an emphasis on following various laws and doctrines and believing ABCD, or, you know, doing the usual traditional religious rituals, you know, in a church service or whatever. It's more directly experiential and directly relevant to your life as an individual. So people are really drawn to this as a type of spirituality for today. Okay, it's very, very interesting. And let me just say, what was I going to say? Oh, with Michael Harner, just a little story I just want to share about his life, where he talks about it in his book. I think it's The Way of the Shaman, where he relays the story of how he was with the shamans there in Ecuador, and it was raining, and they were going from A to B, and they had to cross this river. But because of all these heavy rains, the river was really, really high and very dangerous to cross. And so they were waiting for the water to come down to cross. And he was starting to get restless. He was saying, "Oh, we can get across. Come on, we can get across." And the shamans are looking at him, no, I think we'll wait. And so finally he convinces them to start to make the journey across the river. But he barely makes it. Like, he almost didn't make it. He almost drowned at the other end. And they get over to the other side. And then the shaman said, "You see, you know, we knew that we have our power animals and we're going to be protected. And we knew we would make it across the river. But we weren't too sure about you, if you would make it, okay? Because, you know, you're this Westerner. You're not like a shaman who have had, you know, who has that connection with their power animal." Okay? And so that I just wanted to bring that up as an example of the importance of having that kind of connection for protection. Yeah, it's a good line. Connection for protection. Okay. All right. Well, that's it here. That's all I'm going to say about shamanism is, again, just a little bit of an introduction to a huge topic that's very interesting and I think very much worthwhile studying. All right. Ciao.